Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Olivia, and we're so glad you're here today. Hi, sister. How are you?
I'm really good. We were just talking about how we want to record a bonus episode about the nanny.
We do. We love the nanny.
We love the
strong
nanny.
women.
Listen,
we love strong
Fran
women.
Drescher, she's a complicated woman. She's a complicated woman. She's got some weird points of view. But what Jewish mother doesn't have some weird points of view? And The Nanny is a brilliant, super Jewish show that I adore. I adore it. Maybe I feel something about a Jewish American woman marrying an Englishman too. I don't know.
Save it for the bonus episode. But yes, no, we just love strong women who use their voices, which is what this season's all about. We talked to Kathryn Janicek. Again, is so composed. She was one of those women we talked to who I looked at her and I'm like, how do I be like you? Like, she's just so strong, and every word she used was so like intentional, and but she's such a leader. Like, she just is so supportive of people, so passionate about what she does and helping all these women use their voice. And it was beautiful. We talked to her about her journey to have her daughter and find her husband and her career. And it was just such an awesome episode with Kathryn. What a wonderful person. Truly so happy that we met her. So please enjoy this episode with Kathryn, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. Kathryn Janicek is a 3-time Emmy-winning media and public speaking trainer who helps leaders communicate more effectively with the media and any audience. Kathryn's 25-plus years of experience running live news, TV shows as a media executive and as a spokesperson means she brings expert perspective and guidance on shaping messaging and delivering with impact. Kathryn Janicek Productions is a team of experts who train in leadership development, executive presence, public speaking, media interview performance, communications, sales, and relationship building, and wellness. They train Fortune 500 executives, physicians across the country, and they are the go-to training firm for the American Dental Association, the College of American Pathologists, the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, and other medical associations. Kathryn, wow, that's a lot. That's amazing.
I like to help people.
We understand. I love that. Well, I'm super excited to talk to you today. I think we connected on Twitter. And you've always just had such a beautiful personality, and you're so kind, and just always a nice person on the internet, which is not always true for everybody. And so when we were booking for the season, we were really excited to chat with you. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks. Yes, social media is not all bad, right?
No,
I agreed. Some of my strongest relationships through it.
I love that.
100%. How are you doing today in this moment?
Today, I am doing great. At this moment, Mercury is out of retrograde.
Yeah, I love that.
It was really weird up until Monday. And I didn't really realize that because I'm not someone who follows it, but someone pointed it out on Monday. And I was like, wow, that's why people are just like returning my emails finally and getting back to me. I was having kind of, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I was having a moment where a 4-week period where I was like, oh, am I going to make payroll in August? It was just like a little nerve wracking because I have a lot of responsibility all of a sudden. But today I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. Doing great. I'm doing great today, Jenny.
I love a great. It looks bright and sunny where you are too. So it looks like it's going to be a good day. Why don't you take us back to the beginning of your Fresh Start story?
Great. Well, it was a couple days after Thanksgiving, 8.5 years ago, and I had just gotten back from spending Thanksgiving with my family in Florida, where we always spent it because my parents moved there after living in the Chicago suburbs for a long time. And that was their retirement home. That was their prize for working so hard. They worked so hard. And I was let go. I was VP of News, and they did it very kindly, where they said, we're just not going to do news anymore. We're going to do content. And they just kind of relabeled it. Months later, they went under. So it was a news startup. It was founded by a couple great guys. And it was awesome. I had the opportunity to, like I said, be VP of news after being an executive producer at many local television stations, hiring 60, 80 people, teaching documentary editors how to edit news in a short form, people who had days, weeks, months to work on a project, all of a sudden have to do a minute or 1:30 or a 3-minute little package for news. So it was an incredible challenge. And we created like a CNN wheel, a 24-hour news reel. So it was awesome to create something from the start. But then, it was sad to obviously lose my job. And I found myself at 38 years old. And if anyone can relate to this, listening to it, I'm a woman, 38, did not have children, did not feel at that moment, I wasn't that person who I felt like children were going to complete me, that I had to have them. I never felt that way. I felt like when I meet the right person, the right partner, I will maybe have children. But then at 38, it becomes really real. You're like, because the next move in TV news would be New York or LA after Chicago. And I felt, because I had at that point lived in Chicago for 10 years and had really great girlfriends for the first time. You move around a lot in television, a lot of cities. So I was stable for a long time and had friends. I had my tribe, and I did not want to move to New York or LA next. I didn't want to be a little fish in a big sea and also start that dating thing over again too. So I honestly, at that moment, I decided, not really knowing a lot about it, I said, I'm going to start my own company. And I always knew that my parents, I could always, I think, knowing that I had a net, if I failed, I could move in with my parents. That did not happen, but I could have, having that net, I knew, so I can't say I was that courageous, because I had a net to fall back on. I could always do that. We could always do that, right? It's not the worst thing that could happen in your life, that you could ask for help. But instead, I started my company. I went on OkCupid. All at the same time.
A lot of fresh starts.
A lot of fresh starts all at that time, because I said, you know what, I'm 38. If I wanted to get married, I have to take this seriously now, because you also know, I'm just not going to, this is not groundbreaking. If I want to have a child, I have a small window. And if I want to meet a husband who wants to have a small child or have a child, he's not going to be maybe looking for a 44-year-old, a 42-year-old. But 38, I'm like, this is my window, right? So I knew I had to take it. Not that I was desperate, but I'm like, if I was going to find someone, if I felt like that was 50% of my, goal, maybe I need to take this seriously. This needs to be a part-time job also. So I decided to start returning messages on OK.
So contextualize this for us. What year is this?
This was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So this is
math is hard. 2014.
This was 2014. End of 2014. Yeah. Because I got married in 2016. So flash forward, I met my husband. I went on a bunch of bad first dates, as we do, right? And a sweet story is that when I decided at that moment that I had to take online dating seriously, I actually saw a message that came through, and that person had messaged me a year earlier, and I just wasn't taking it seriously. And so I didn't see his message, but he had the cojones to message me again. And most guys don't do that. When they don't get a response, they don't message again. And we had a great first call, a great 1 hour phone call, the worst first date ever. Worst first date. But he again had the balls, the courage to text message me the next day and say, you know what, I really didn't get I don't really know what you thought, but we had a first call that was great, and I'd love to try this again. So he also,
what was so bad about that first date?
Well, I don't think he would mind me sharing this, but first of all, my thing was I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free. And so there wasn't a lot of stuff to eat I was that person, right? I was really picky. And then he didn't drink, and I have never been honestly, at 38 years old, 38 years old, I found myself on a first date where it was the first time in 20 years. I mean, I've been dating for a long time, engaged a couple times, and I met someone who didn't drink, and I didn't know what that looked like. I expected that I was going to have a husband that was going to like make me a martini or have a bottle of wine. Like that's what I envisioned. And I'm going to tell you that my relationship, my future turned out to be even better than what I thought it would be because he doesn't drink.
Yeah.
And I, honestly, I haven't drank in 5 or 6 months now because I realized after what I listened to an amazing neurologist who has a podcast, Dr. Huberman,
Yep.
and he had an incredible podcast in September. And I happened to be in San Francisco training a biotech firm. And I was going in this direction, but when he said like, there's literally no benefit from it, it's a poison.
Yeah.
I just, at that moment, I didn't drink again. And I haven't even thought, well, I think about it once in a while, but I've successfully gone to concerts without drinking now and having great dinners with friends who definitely drink and have a good time. And I'm in this point where I'm like, I gave up so many things like gluten, dairy to like biohack. I'm an older mom. I want to be around till I'm 120. So why was I still drinking? And that was like the last thing I just gave up. I will not give up my coffee though. I'm going to tell you.
Coffee. I understand that.
Understood. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, especially when you have a partner that does something less, sort of the way you move in that direction. And there's such a, I don't know, idea that like we can only sort of socialize in this way. And I do think it can be really overwhelming. I understand. I am dairy free too. So I understand going on a date, not really being able to eat anything. Like it all makes sense. But I'm glad that he had the cojones to reach out again, because it sounds like
I am too, because it turned out to be, I think I met my first non-narcissist because I was definitely attracted to that. And that's why they did implode those relationships I had. And he was not, I didn't have the fireworks. He wasn't trying to like song and dance me. And, that first date, there wasn't that big, show. And if you talk to any dating coach who's worth their salt, they will say like, that's not a narcissist. If it's kind of like not a big, show, probably a normal guy and he'll be a great dad.
You seem like, you were talking about the way you date and like the way that you were like, I'm going to take this on as a project. You seem incredibly pragmatic and incredibly, like obviously intelligent, but like smart logistical about the way you do things, and also so warm. And so I feel like that is the perfect breeding ground to attract narcissists.
Possibly, because it kept happening. Plus, I liked the show. Gosh, I was in television for over 20 years. I like a show, right? I like a very entertaining show. And these guys were extremely entertaining, but solid, and you could count on them, and that they had your back. Not always, right?
Yeah. So take us back a little bit to just set the scene here. Where did you grow up?
All over the country. My dad, we moved a lot. My mom did not start working again until I was in 7th grade. So she raised us, which was awesome. My dad worked, and we moved I was born in Illinois. We moved to Boston, New Hampshire, then Mission Viejo, California, which is, Orange County. And then we moved, when I was in 6th grade, we moved to Salt Lake City, a suburb of Salt Lake City. And I was, one of the only people who were my religion in my school, because we went to public schools at the time. It was the late 80s, early 90s. So it was definitely, and I felt like an outcast there. I had my James, and he's at Columbia in New York. He's an awesome guy. He protected, he was my one Jewish friend, and I had my one, atheist friend, and I was the Catholic, and it was like, we were the trifecta that protected each other. And these were great guys. So I was really lucky. We were there for 6 years. And then my junior year of high school, we moved back to the Chicago suburbs. Okay. So I went to 4 high schools and 5 elementary schools.
So I was going to say, there's a reason that you're so good with people. And this comes from your background, right? You've had to kind of reinvent yourself over and over your entire life.
I'm a life of fresh starts.
Yeah.
And you're wearing the green too.
Right. And also, how to ask questions to people and introduce yourself to people. So did you always where did the idea for going into news and entertainment and kind of you are very much I could just, that is who you are. When I look at you, it's like you are an interviewer, you're a producer, you're all these things. Did you know as a child or a teenager that you wanted to go into that industry?
Yes, I didn't know television, but 7th grade, I was on my school paper. We had a school paper in junior high, which I don't know how, common that is, but I'm really lucky we had that. And then I was on the radio, the the high school radio, and I interned in high school at our suburban paper here in
Okay.
the Chicago suburbs, which is like
Mm.
really like who interns, right?
Where in the suburbs were you?
I was in Palatine. I went to Fremd
Okay.
High School.
Okay.
Great high school. Great. I would
Okay.
be really excited if my daughter went to a school like that. And public school, awesome school. And then I also wrote a newsletter. I remember typing on my grandmother's typewriter in the Chicago suburbs and like writing out like a newsletter, which is funny because I can barely get the Christmas cards out on time right now. But I did like a little newsletter on a one sheet. So I always like telling stories and writing. Writing was my thing.
Interesting. And communications.
Communications. And obviously, you know, when you move around a lot, I'm really lucky that my parents they specifically moved us not in the middle of the summer. So when I coach a lot of sales teams and stuff, and they sometimes have to move their family around. And I always tell them, your kids are going to be fine. Like, I know this is stressful. They're upset. They're very emotional about it. It was terrible. My mom had a big box of Kleenex in the middle of the table. We knew this was the announcement, right? We're moving. But I will tell you that your kids are going to be great. Like, they are going to be resilient, but move them in the middle of the school year. Because my parents always made sure that every kid knew we were the new kid. And I'm so grateful they didn't move us in the middle of the summer where they think like maybe someone just kind of started a different school, but they're not new in our state. But at least I was introduced as the new kid like 2 weeks in. It wasn't like in the middle, but she'd wait, a month or 2 weeks
That's
in.
fascinating.
So, and I liked meeting people. I mean, obviously I had to get good at meeting people and adapting to where I lived. You know, now I'm in Boston, so I would actually be the first to pick up an accent in my family because we as human beings, we want to adapt and belong, right?
Yeah.
So I do adapt quickly and belong. Like when I coach, you know, a biotech firm to a construction company to yesterday, it was a big hotel, you know, hotel brand. I have to adapt and learn who I'm talking to very quickly and be able to present to that audience member. So that's what I teach now in my business, right? How to adapt your communications specifically to that audience you're talking to. And I learned that as a kid.
Right, exactly. I love that. So how did your career in the news industry begin?
I applied at a couple schools like Mizzou, which is very good for journalism. Marquette University, very good. Northwestern University in Chicago. Northwestern, I remember vividly saying no because you couldn't touch anything. You couldn't do the journalism until junior year. And my dad and I remember having a conversation. He was like, what if you don't like it? And you get to junior year and you've taken all these things, you know, Marquette, this is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Marquette, and remember, I was like super into Catholic, like I was the Catholic kid, right? I love, you know, I wanted to go to that Jesuit college. And Marquette allowed you to actually work on the television station your freshman year. I had an internship at, you know, a local TV station in Milwaukee, where Mizzou, I would have been kind of in nowhere, you know, middle of nowhere and at your college station. But in Milwaukee, I wanted to be in a big city where I had I could intern at all the big city television stations. And that's why I made that decision.
That's fascinating. And so you had a long time, right, in that industry.
I moved from, you know, Champaign, Illinois to Memphis to Detroit was great, to Minneapolis. And then I moved home to Chicago and I worked at WGN and NBC and then a TV startup. Yeah, it was a good ride.
In that time, you earned the 3 Emmys, which are behind you as you speak. So you did a lot of work. So by the time you met your husband, you were a pretty independent woman.
Oh, yeah. And he was too, you know, he very independent. So 2 very independent people who do things very specifically. We had to learn how to communicate. We had to learn how to communicate with each other and not drive each other nuts. Like, you know, marriage is not easy. Like, you know, it's not what you see on Instagram, right? And I've been very clear with my friends too that raising a child is not easy too, because I think we see one thing on Instagram. We see the beautiful mom and she's got the 3 kids and they all have matching outfits. And I'm very clear, like I have friends who made the choice to not have a child, but I can tell they're still asking me like, was this a good, and I'll say like, it's hard, you know, my daughter's had a last day and a half and I was in bed with her at 1:30 this morning. And I kind of had a Dayquil mind yesterday while I was coaching, you know, this hotel brand. And I kept thinking, am I making sense? Right. And there are moments when I'll be at an airport and I find out she's sick and I'm like, should I go home? Or I've had to cancel things once or twice in the last couple of years. You know, she's 4 now, so it's not obviously it's made a huge impact, but I'm not canceling things every week because, you know, we put a team in place obviously too, but it's not easy. It's very difficult. And then you throw 2 very independent parents, right, who married late in life together, who are learning how to communicate with each other. And it's not always, you know, roses and sunshine.
No, it is not. No, it's not. So you decide to start your own business. What are the first steps you take to kind of get this off the ground?
Well, first of all, I followed the demand. People asked for media training because of the fact that I was in the media. So I was just like, you know, economics 101. I remember like my macro econ class is like, follow the demand. Don't create a product that you just will figure out if it's going to sell, right?
100%.
If people ask you for something, just do it, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened was I was coaching the head of a labor union and coaching some other folks, CEOs, and they would say, gosh, what you're doing, how you're coaching me, you should coach my sales team and my C-suite before they get on stage, before they do their annual meeting, before they go to Copenhagen and give a speech, you know, at a tech conference, you know, before my sales team goes in to pitch a customer, or before we go in to pitch an investor like JP Morgan in New York. So actually right now, our business is mainly public speaking coaching, because more often, you know, 8 years later after I started my business, think about it, like more often people are doing public speaking, which is just talking to one person or many, than really getting on CNN. I still coach, you know, people call me, hey, my client's going to be on Good Morning America in 3 days. Can you get them ready? Or Today Show or Bloomberg News, or, you know, but the majority is public speaking training, which we all need. And we didn't learn that in college.
No, we had the benefit. We went to a private school, a Quaker school, and so they did a lot of public speaking training, which is why Jenny and I have zero fear of public speaking. I would rather public speak on a stage.
I don't know if that's why. I think there's something missing in our brains that fears public speaking.
I have zero fear of public speaking.
You're really lucky.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, I professionally officiated weddings for a decade, and people were like, aren't you nervous standing up there and doing that? And I was like, it's never occurred to me. Don't know what to say. It just never occurs to me to be nervous.
Kathryn, so while you're building this startup, were you dating your husband at the time, or what was the overlap of time there?
Yes, he met me right when I was laid off. Like,
okay.
And I got to tell you, I was used to being able to pay for dinner, like big dinners, like take my turn, like a very independent woman. Like I didn't want the guy to pay for everything, you know? So I also liked the fact that I could impress him, like first, you know, front row tickets to concerts and stuff. Like it's weird how it's really screwed up actually, how we think like that's our value instead of that I'm a really great conversationalist, or I'm a nice person. Like I'm a really nice person and I'm caring. But that to me was not my, what I felt like I brought to the table for so many years. I felt like people dated me because I had interesting stories, you know, I always knew what was going on. I had, you know, my finger on the pulse. I didn't even think that someone would date me because I'm a nice person. I'm, you know, I'm good. I'm a good person. So when I felt really low, I was really at the lowest I had ever been, because I didn't have a lot of money. I was burning through my savings that I had saved for the last year of my really just, you know, I always had a 401k and stuff, but you don't touch that, right?
No.
But the money that I saved, seeing the sign that I think that, you know, this was going to go under, that was going quickly. You know, rent is not cheap in Chicago. And so it was definitely a very humbling experience to date my husband and be at like, hey, what you see is what you get.
Isn't that so interesting though, that you found this person and like you were forced to be your stripped down version of yourself, right? You were forced to not be like, look at this omakase dinner, look at these tickets. You had to just be Kathryn. And that was the thing. That was the person.
That was the person, you know. And I was also, in my head, I was also heavy. You know, I wasn't, I had gained a little weight because I was sad, you know. I wasn't working 12, 13 hours a day in a newsroom and running around, and now I was like trying to figure out what I was going to do, and, half a bottle of wine at night, and kind of, sad, like trying to figure out what am I going to do? How do you start a company, snacking a lot. So he did meet me at what I felt was one of my lowest times in my life. Yet he liked me. Right. He wasn't looking for a project. He's not a fixer. He knows enough to not be that person, but he liked me for who I am. Thank God.
Which is not, I mean, you are a beautiful, wonderful, like soul and spirit, like on the inside and outside, but like, what a beautiful part of your journey that is, right? Like you decided to take this moment and make a brave decision to do your thing. And he came into your life at that time. So how much after dating did you guys decide to get married?
I think it was 9 months or so. We were at a certain age. You're like, we really want to have kids or try to have kids. Like, if we're going to make a go at this, we're going to make a go at this.
Yeah.
So my mom is blind. She went blind at 59. It was a very sudden thing.
Okay.
And I definitely dreamed of getting married somewhere in Chicago, art museum. You have this vision, right, of how you're going to get married. But it became easier for my dad, who had just had a stroke. My dad had a stroke literally right when Ted and I started dating. So what's sad is that Ted really never got to meet my dad. He met my dad at a different dad, So he was meeting, he's coming into the family. My mom's blind. My dad just had a stroke. He's not really engaged with my new boyfriend, right? So he's not meeting a family that's like really excited to, meet Kathryn's new boyfriend. Like, there's a lot going on. And so we got married on the beach in Fort Myers because it was totally easier for my parents because they were there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not my dream wedding, but my friends had a really great time, and we had a great time. They all flew in. His friends flew in, my friends flew in, and wasn't the super fanciest hotel or any, it wasn't like what I dreamt, but I definitely got married to the person I was supposed to get married to at the time I was supposed to get married. And my dad was there. He is no longer with us. So I'm glad he was able to walk me down the aisle, and I'm really lucky it just all worked out, but it wasn't how I dreamed of, right? Like, right. I have an employee who just had a baby, and it wasn't how she envisioned. It wasn't her birth plan, but she had her healthy baby, and that's all that counts, that he's here.
And doesn't that kind of follow a little bit what we were saying before, is like sometimes it's not all fireworks and explosives and all the big things, right? It's those small moments and like those little special times, right? Your parent, like now your dad walked you down the aisle, like you have that, right, forever, and like that's the most special. So as we know, because we're startup founders too, it takes a long time to get a business going. So when did you start kind of seeing that growth in the business? And then as that was happening, did you start thinking about having kids because now you were married?
The growth actually did not really happen until the year I was pregnant with Sophie. So it was a couple years. It takes time. 2-3 years in, I was starting to go, okay, this is catching on. Like, this is going to be okay. I was also going through IVF, like from the moment we got married. So 2016, and now it's 2023 when we're talking right now. So it took a little bit of time, but also I move a lot faster now because I'm not going to a doctor every day, getting my blood test or having to, losing a child, a miscarriage, and then being depressed for a week, how long, it doesn't take just a week to mourn that.
No.
And then we lost twins in our 4th round of IVF. We lost twins at 18, 17 weeks, second trimester.
Kathryn.
Like, it shouldn't have happened, right? And then you're like devastated again. And I was bulking up. My doctor wanted me to gain a bunch of weight because they knew that they would have to bring the twins in, early, because that they were already, they were born in the same sack. Like, it was all something. It was something. And then, unfortunately, we lost them. So then you're going through that. So I will say, I don't have the founder story that like maybe a single guy would have, right? Or an older woman who isn't going through IVF, right? So it wasn't the fact that I was getting married or anything. That was the easy plan, right? You just, you hire the hotel, and that was easy. It was the going to the doctor appointments, going to, high risk pregnancy, and then loss after loss, and then deciding, let's do it a 5th time. Ted said it was his lucky number was 5. So I was not ready to do it again, but we did it, and we have our 4-year-old now.
Yeah.
That's
So
a lot. I
it's a
mean, that's all
lot.
so much.
It was a
And
lot.
to just watch somebody go through, I have friends that are going through IVF, and to watch them go through one cycle is really draining, and like emotionally draining, financially draining. I mean, in every capacity. So 5 cycles is really, that's just emotionally a lot.
How do you
Well,
keep hope during that time?
well, one is I am lucky that other women shared that they went through it, because I knew of one woman who is an executive at a television network in New York.
Mhm.
And she and I had worked together in Chicago, and she shared with me privately that she went through 10 rounds of IVF.
Wow.
So when Ted said, 5's my lucky number, he never said, can we do another round, Kathryn? He just said 5's my lucky number. And I was like, I'm competitive. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to do it. But in my head, I was constantly like, she went through 10, so
Yeah.
I can do another. So I kept like knowing. So that's why I'm very open about my story. I'm very open about, that I'm glad I switched OBGYN. I'm glad I switched fertility doctors, because that doctor, after I lost twins, he was like, okay, ready for egg donor. You have to have an egg donor. He was just looking at numbers on his website, because he wants his number for live births to be a certain number. There was nothing wrong with me. I got pregnant every time, it was like, honestly, almost every time. There was nothing wrong with me that, maybe it was the drugs, the IVF drugs, that they split late. And then they were already in peril when they were developing. So, I think it's really important for women to share their stories of loss and IVF and be really honest that it wasn't like a miracle from God.
Yeah.
That, because women need to go like, wow, okay, I didn't know that I might have to get some intervention here to get my happy ending.
Yeah.
100%. 100. I mean, Olivia and I have so many friends that, or we know people that like suddenly, come out with a baby, and you're like, wait, there's something hinky there. And did something happen? And people don't want to talk about it. And they, I think it's like you said, this woman shared her story with you, and it gave you hope. And every time, we say this on like every episode, but whenever you share your story, you don't know whose roadmap that's going to be. And it's so important to talk about these things, because all of the reasons that we have trouble getting pregnant, like, it just, it helps people, and it gives them hope when we openly discuss it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I went that last round, I will say I did everything, like drop sugar, drop the gluten, like religiously, dairy, because every book I read was like, eggs want, sugar's a poison too, right? And so it's inflammatory and stuff. So I did the acupuncture every single week. I did the fertility massage. I was like, if I'm going to do this again, I have a window that's closing. I'm going to do everything.
Yeah.
So I just want, if anyone's listening and going through this, like, there's a lot of things you can try out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not alone, right? You have people
not
you can
alone.
turn to. So what is that like? Unfortunately, I have a lot of friends who have lost babies. Losing twins, losing babies is a really big deal. How did you manage grieving that while also preparing to do IVF again, while also running your own business?
And being in a marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't make a lot of money that year. It was not like now where I'm working literally like 9, 10, 12 hours a day. In between, I have precious moments when Sophie's awake, and I do not, work. I try not to work with her around. How did I manage it? I saw a therapist. Ted and I went to see someone who's wonderful in our life still, who teaches us how to communicate better as partners, who we once in a while go in for a touch up. It doesn't have to be, it's not because we had a huge fight or anything. It's just like, hey, we want to keep learning how he's different than I am. No one's alike, right? Perfectly alike. He communicates in one way, I communicate another way. We constantly get touch points with her. It's great. But we met her during that moment because I needed some help, right? I needed, and she was really great. And then I also went to another therapist too, alone, because I had a client who was a therapist, a psychotherapist, who was, I was helping with her stage presence, and she suggested her person. So I'm like, I'll try everybody, and that person, I will never forget. She said, you are still thinking about like adoption and the what if you don't, because I've always had to protect myself, I've
Yep.
always tried to think of my plan B and my plan C and maybe my plan D. I'm a
Mhm.
television producer. If my A1 story, if the chopper goes down, like doesn't go crash, but if it
Yeah.
doesn't make A1, if it doesn't
Yeah.
make the first story, what's my plan B and C? So I'm
Right.
used to having lots of plans because
Mhm.
I'm the decision maker, right? I got to tell the
Mhm.
anchor where to go next. So I was constantly trying to tell myself where I'm going to go next. We could adopt, we could do surrogate, we could do all these things. This therapist at that moment told me to stop thinking about all my alternative plans and
Mm.
Yep.
visualize the day that I was going to give birth. Who's in the
Ooh,
room?
I have
What
chills.
color are the balloons? I
Yeah.
know. Who's the doctor? Visualize the doctor.
Mm.
What do the nurses look like? What do the
Mm.
nurses say? Who's holding your hands? You know,
Right.
I had to go through that process with her, and I literally had to take, she made me take all the other plans out of my head
Yep.
and put them away and only visualize. So for months going through the IVF, being pregnant with her, I had to visualize the day of my pregnancy. And the day of my pregnancy came. It was not exactly how I wanted it to be because they did induce me because I was 42 and there was this small study of women with stillbirths, because I went all the way. Like usually IVF pregnancies don't go all the
Right.
way,
Mm.
40 weeks. And all of a sudden I found that myself on the eve of the 40 weeks and they were like, we're going to induce you. And it was not my plan. I wanted to have a natural birth. I wanted the movie, right? The water breaking, the honey, I think it's time.
Right,
I
yeah,
did
yeah.
all of that.
Producer.
I didn't have it, but I knew at that moment I had to just follow the doctor's recommendations and go with it. And I had my baby. I also had an epidural. I did not want it. My mother never had an epidural. So I was like, my mom didn't have it, so I'm not going to have it. I had it. It was perfectly fine. Thank God I had it because honestly, it was a very pleasant birth.
Yes.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it. Would do it again, 5 stars, rated
Yeah.
very highly. And so yeah, I had to see a therapist. I had we did, it was sad, it was terrible. And I have to say one more thing because I'm going to write about this someday.
Yeah.
I love my mother. My mother tried to protect me. My mother, her job as my mother is to protect me. My job as Sophie's mother is to protect her.
Mhm.
After I lost the twins, my parents came in, or they were here because you have to go get a DNC. You have to let the children go. You have to go and have what was marked at the doctor's office at the hospital, an abortion.
Yeah.
You have to have an abortion when your children are dead in your belly, right? That is what one way of a reason why we need to have an abortion, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's horrible and nobody wants it. I did not want to have an abortion when I had my first miscarriage. I did not want to have an abortion when I lost my twins. That was not my choice.
Right.
But that was what happened, okay? But my mom, they were here for a week. They helped me through some things. I was still crying every night when they left. And I was dropping my parents off at the airport and my mother was in the back seat and she said, Kathryn, please put children in the rear view mirror. You have a wonderful husband who loves you. You have a career that's blossoming. Please. And she was protecting me. She didn't want to see me in so much pain again. And so honestly, it took me a little time to do that again, to go to IVF, because I'm like, I didn't want to disappoint my parents.
Yeah.
Them through all this sadness again. And I remember texting my brother-in-law saying, I am so sorry, but I have to do this again. And I'm so sorry that I have to put you through so much pain because I saw my family in so much pain, but I had to do it again because I wanted to try. I wanted to have my daughter. And thank God I didn't listen to my mom.
Yeah.
My mom was trying to protect me, but thank God I did not listen because I was able to give my dad his first and only grandchild before he died months later. But he got to hold her, he got to enjoy her, he got to see her, and my mom gets to enjoy her too. And my daughter holds her elbow and guides her on the beach and guides her grandmother, and she's going to be such an important part in her life. But I'm so glad my mother. And there's a lot of mothers out there who are going to try to protect us, right?
Yeah. And well-meaning people in our life who love us and they
want to keep us safe because it's not
Right.
body neutral to have pregnancy, right? Like something could have happened to you in all of that too. And I'm sure she was very worried about her baby in that.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just thinking of this when you were talking about your daughter and your mother. Our grandfather was blind. He had macular degeneration. So by the time we came on the scene, he was blind. And it's an interesting experience to have a blind grandparent. And I do think it makes you really good at describing things. And I think that there's a lot of like really beneficial, there's a beautiful relationship there between them obviously already, and it's just funny because it's not something we encounter a lot, but we had our grandfather, we would guide him, and we got really good at getting on the phone and describing everything about our day and telling him about everything.
Oh, that's so good to hear, because I've not met a grandchild of a grandparent who's blind. So thank you. It will be a very special relationship. And Sophie, like you two, will be very special because of her grandmother.
Yeah, and you learn to communicate in a different style, right? And to see the world through, they get to see it through Sophie, she'll see it through Sophie's eyes. So I obviously follow you on social media, and you do such a beautiful job at showcasing the balance between a working mom life and being this joyful mom to Sophie. And in particular, you guys went to Disneyland, right, recently? And
Yes.
I loved it. You talked a little bit about how you went for work, right? Or you were there for work, and then you took time to be with Sophie. And the pictures of you two at Disneyland were so joyful and beautiful. And I would love to hear, just before we let you go, like a little bit about kind of that balance, quote unquote, because I understand I have two sons, but of like being that really full-time business owner, and then also wanting to, be a mom, but also wanting to show your daughter that you're a kick-ass business owner too.
Yes, I want to show my daughter, and I have to finally just own this. I want to show my daughter that she can be a mom and she can own a company.
Yeah.
I was booking this morning actually to be out of town for 2 days this summer, and I realized I was at a hospital last summer in Memphis, and I was there for a whole week. And that was the moment when I said, I can't be away from her for that long. And that's why, honestly, when we were in LA to work a couple of weeks ago, we took her and the nanny. We got an Airbnb instead of the hotel the conference was at. And we had a great time because she was with us. It would have taken me out of my game sometimes being away for an entire week, for sure.
Yeah.
The fact that we could come home, even if she was already asleep, at least we got to come home. We could have breakfast with her the next morning. She was in our house. You don't have that moment of worrying. Now, again, I know I'm very privileged that now my company is in a good spot where I can afford to have a full-time nanny, and we can go and get an Airbnb. And I know that's an absolute privilege that a lot of mothers do not have, to be able to take their child to work with them. But I'm also putting in guardrails where if I do need to be away from Sophie, which I do, I fly a lot. It's a 2-night window, right? And then I come back. So for example, I'm in New Jersey in July. I'm not necessarily going to put another trip right on top of it.
Right.
I want to be home with her for a couple of days. So there is no balance. There is, I talk about like kind of a flow, like the ocean, sometimes it's heavy on work. Sometimes it's not. It's not like a menstrual flow. Like that was kind of weird. But
And think of it like a lazy river.
It's a lazy river. I also, I know what it's like. I have a very good 100% in partner, right?
Yeah.
So there are moments when he's super busy, and there's moments when I'm super busy. And again, you just have to have help. You have to.
You do, and you mean building your support system. I mean, especially when I was going through my divorce and I was own my own businesses, we had a babysitter who we still adore. Like I always joke, like, I can't wait to make enough money to hire her full time. Like, you have to have these other people that love your children. And like, that's a beautiful thing. And I think, like you said before, Kathryn, asking for help is wonderful, right? And having this village around your daughter to support you when you need to do what you love to do is a beautiful thing. And I think we're still shaming moms for wanting to work, right? And having the nanny or the babysitter. And I have a lot of friends who feel guilty, right? Having help. And it's like, no, that's how they used to do it. People used to raise children in villages. And this is just, you're choosing your village.
I'm glad you said that, because that's where I go when I feel a little weird, because when my mom reminds me that she, stayed home for 12 years and all that. And I realized that that's very new. And honestly, to human beings, we were all just kind of put into areas, right? And maybe one mom would stick around and watch a bunch of, where other people maybe hunt and gather, right? And then to kill animals. And we're used to being in a village and helping each other, but we have all created this where it's very difficult for parents to work and also care for their have children.
Yeah.
It's impossible for a lot of people.
Yep.
So we have to give that up, that feeling, because honestly, my daughter is better off because she doesn't have a mother who at moments resents her because she gave up her career, right? If I was to give it up for 10 years, I'd be a 59-year-old, 57-year-old woman trying to start a company. And I don't know if that would have been for me. So I specifically know that Sophie is better off because I have my company. She can see, she gets to meet all kinds of wonderful women because we have all these women on our team, you know?
Yeah.
And people just in general. She meets a lot of incredible people. So
and showing her, you know, we're doing I think we're all doing really hard work to, you know, sort of promote feminism, bring down the patriarchy and all of that. But like, we still live in this world and we're still sort of breathing the air of all of it. And to show her that like, you really can do that and you're a badass and that you're her mom and that you don't have to sacrifice one or the other. It's really important to show little girls that.
It's really important. And it is, we all have to do a better job than letting go of the guilt, right? Like the post that you saw, Olivia, I don't love going to the playground. I don't love,
I don't either.
I don't bake cookies, you know, I don't believe you know, in sugar and stuff, you know? But I've really ripped myself apart sometimes thinking that I don't live up to this mom definition that I made up or I see in some movies, which is not all movies, but she's gonna see some really cool things, and she goes on a lot of neat trips, and she's definitely been on more planes than I ever was.
And you know, Kathryn, here at Fresh Starts, one of our kind of mantras is there are no rules, right? There are no rules. The only two rules we have are to be safe and to be in the pursuit of joy, and everything else is made up. Right. So you get to make up what it means to be a mom to you. And if that means taking your daughter as you produce things and you're on stages and she gets to see that, or, you know, you have the nights that she's feverish and you're there with her, it is what it is to you. You know, we all make things up. And, you know, I think we don't talk enough about the parent-child relationship and how it's so nuanced and so unique to every parent and child. You know, even if you have siblings, it's different for each parent and child, right? So I think what you're doing is so beautiful. And I'm so happy she's in the world and gets to experience all this with you. And, you know, it's really exciting, I think, to my boys are almost 7 and 10, to watch this next generation learn and grow up and see what they're going to do. That's what motivates me to keep working. So I'm excited to see what Sophie does in her lifetime.
I can't wait to see what your boys do.
Thank you. So
they're going to do some big things.
I don't know. So Kathryn, if somebody's going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you can impart to them?
Find someone to talk to who's impartial. Like, I really cannot say enough about therapy. I didn't do it in my early years. It was not talked about within my family. I don't know if anyone did it, but having somebody who's certified, licensed, who knows what they're talking about, because your friends don't necessarily know. They're not professionals, and sometimes they're biased, right? So just finding good resources to help you through it. You know, and it could be even like finding a great fractional a CPA, and I have a fractional CFO and a good bookkeeper. You know, find good experts. Don't try to do it all yourself.
Love that. Very much in line with what we do. And last question, what was the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
Oh, you know, honestly, that's easy. And I don't think a lot of days I would have this, but my husband never really cooked a lot when we met, but in the last couple of years, he's really gotten into it. And I'm so happy about it because it's not all on me, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And because I know a lot of friends who have big careers, but still the cooking's on them. And I'm like, that's not fair, right? He made pork chops on the grill last night and an amazing cabbage salad that he made the salad dressing and stuff with sliced almonds. And it blew my mind. It was better than any restaurant. So that was it. It was last night's dinner.
That sounds amazing.
That sounds really good. Yeah.
I love that. Well, Kathryn, thank you for being here. And we love what you're doing and your spirit and your energy and just the way that you are, you know, supporting people in their confidence and empowering them to be ready for their journey. So Keep up the amazing work, and we're so excited to have you in our orbit and watch what you do, because I feel like you're just at the beginning, and we're very excited to watch you as you continue on. Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're so proud of you.
A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.